When Nothing announced the Nothing Phone 3 Pro, I was wondering if they could really deliver on packing unique AI features and an improved camera system into their A series philosophy, especially at this price. This is the Nothing Phone 3 Pro, which starts at $459. There's also the standard Nothing Phone 3A, which starts around $379. The main difference with the Pro model and what we're focusing on today is primarily its more advanced camera system, including a dedicated telephoto lens and more RAM. We'll get to that. The Nothing Phone 3 Pro does a surprisingly good job of feeling like a much more expensive phone with just a couple of small asterisks. I have no choice but to start with how this phone looks, because Nothing has a truly distinctive and evolving design language. This year, the choice of a black and silver finish with the refined transparent elements is really stunning. It's got the signature Glyph interface, of course, but the new camera module design gives it a fresh yet familiar feel. They've tweaked a few things. The camera module has a new layout, and the integration of the aluminum frame with the glass back feels even more premium than previous A-series phones. I think this is fire. The standard Nothing Phone 3A is similar in its core design ethos, but the Pro definitely feels a step up in materials, and that camera bump makes a statement. Now, some people were talking about the camera design because we've seen leaks, and to be fair, it's definitely a choice that stands out, but I still think it's nice and gives the Pro model its own identity. The slightly more pronounced camera bump on the Pro even becomes a nice place to rest my finger and get some grip. So if the goal is still to be the budget phone with an interesting aesthetic and a premium feel, I think mission accomplished. Like, find me a more interesting and well-built phone design for this price? I'll wait. Exactly. So once it comes to using this phone, like I said, it's impressive how close this $459 phone gets to feeling like an $800 flagship. I feel like I can see a lot of Nothing's growing confidence and experience here. They can afford to get better parts and more refined manufacturing, and it's paying off. Which is a nice step up. It's also IP54, rated for dust and splash resistance, which offers some peace of mind. It even has a much brighter and smoother 6.7-inch AMOLED display. Now that gets up to around 700 nits typically, but can peak up to 1,300 nits for HDR content. Forget the numbers though. This just feels like a flagship. It's a 6.7-inch jumbo-sized display with impressively even bezels. It's 120Hz high refresh rate. It just feels like other flagships do. Now yes, it's not quite as bright or sharp as the actual Ultra or Pro Max phones, and yes, the optical fingerprint reader can be a little inconsistent sometimes, and the haptics are good but not best in class, but those are small prices to pay when you're reminded of, well, the price you're paying. And they are using a Qualcomm chip again on this phone, so it is a Snapdragon 7S Gen 3 with 12 gigs of RAM in this Pro model. Now, some budget phones are trying to be the spec monster on paper for the price. This phone's not trying to do that entirely. It has decent specs and a good amount of RAM, but I think this is an appropriate upper mid-range chip for this phone, especially because Nothing's software optimization is so good that it makes this hardware perform exceptionally well. Indeed, what Nothing is doing with their software is super impressive, and it really elevates the value of the thing. This budget phone feels as quick and smooth most of the time as some spec monsters. So hey, shout out specifically to Nothing software team. This is running Nothing OS 3.1 on Android 15. They do up to 3 major Android version updates and an impressive 6 years of security updates with these phones. And so many things like these little animations, things like swiping down the notification bar, expanding a folder, or swiping between recent apps. So many of these little animations have been optimized to feel super smooth every time, and you can feel it. Now, it's not immune to hiccups. You sometimes feel the mask slip off a little bit when you're moving through some heavy apps or you're gaming for a while, and the stuff that's stressful on the GPU, you can absolutely find a way to get this phone stuttering a little bit. But I cannot be mad at the performance of this phone. Despite it not being a top-tier flagship chip, it is so smooth. And I like a lot of features they've been adding to Nothing OS. The new Essential Space feature, accessed by a dedicated hardware key, is really unique and super useful for quickly saving and organizing thoughts or screenshots. You can quickly capture and annotate on the fly. So the software is great, but you might be wondering about AI, because I don't know if you've noticed, but Nothing is one of the newer smartphone companies that is carefully integrating AI stuff in their new phones, focusing on utility. They don't have a built-in AI image generator or a whole bunch of AI writing tools like some others. There is no AI object removal in the main gallery yet, but they are focusing on practical AI But there is one really interesting big new software and hardware feature. So you see this here, they've added a single button to the side below the volume rocker. It's subtly integrated. This is the essential key. If you press it, it opens up the essential space. And this is an AI-powered hub to capture, process, and recall your notes, ideas, screenshots, and even voice memos. It can extract relevant info like flight details from a screenshot and help you organize. So kind of think of it like a super-powered, context-aware scrapbook that lives in your pocket. I think that's an awesome start to something that could be really cool and very useful someday. It's still kind of being built out. Nothing calls it early access for some functionalities. I have this personal rule where I won't dump my life into something if it's not multi-platform or easily exportable, and the broader ecosystem for Essential Space is still developing. So there's no web version yet that I know of, but maybe someday. Or I could just use it for quick, on-device stuff. You could too, although I will say you are going to press this button accidentally a whole bunch of times until you get used to it, especially if you're used to where other brands place their power buttons. Now, both the Nothing Phone 3A and the 3A Pro have the same 5,000 mAh battery and good battery life. I was consistently getting a solid day and a half of use, sometimes stretching to 2 days with moderate usage, averaging around 6 to 7 hours of screen on time. Both have 45-watt wired charging now, which is pretty standard and reasonably fast. Basically, that's 0 to 100 in about an hour. And they are both still missing wireless charging. So that's one of the things that, for me, someone who's used to wireless charging, that's a tougher trade-off. But this is one of the things that Nothing has decided to omit for the Phone 3, a series, to keep the price competitive. So the main difference you really need to know about between the Nothing Phone 3A and the 3A Pro is the cameras. The 3A Pro is the one, theoretically, you should want if you care more about cameras, especially zoom, and if you don't, then the standard Nothing Phone 3A should be fine for you. That's on paper, anyway. So I shot a bunch with the Nothing Phone 3A Pro cameras, and what was interesting is, while the primary and ultra-wide felt quite similar to what you might expect from a good mid-ranger, the telephoto on the Pro really changes the game for this price point. The main sensor on the Pro is a 50 megapixels unit, likely with OIS. Autofocus is generally quick and reliable. In general, the pictures from the main camera are surprisingly great. The sensor's big enough to get you a soft background for close-up subjects. The colors are vibrant, but not too over-processed, although you might get some minor fringing in very high contrast scenes or a bit of noise in shadows in very low light. But generally, they're quite impressive photos for this segment. The 50 megapixel ultra-wide is also pretty good, which is to say, decent for the price, offering good consistency with the main camera in daylight. But the 3x optical telephoto lens on the Nothing Phone 3A Pro, which some reports suggest might even be a periscope design, definitely gives you a more usable far range and better portrait shots than digital zoom on the standard model. I really appreciate a good, usable telephoto in this price bracket. I just think I was pleasantly surprised by the camera versatility on the Pro, given the price. The addition of a capable telephoto lens is a significant upgrade and makes the Pro moniker feel earned here, from my experience. So here's my final thoughts on this Nothing Phone 3A Pro launch. First of all, as someone who might also be looking at the Google Pixel 9a, this spec sheet, on paper, makes the competition look closely matched. But nothing brings its unique flair. This looks loaded for its price. Obviously, it's got that 3x telephoto camera, much bigger, brighter, 120 Hz AMOLED display, the Snapdragon 7S Gen 3, a massive 5,000 mAh battery with great battery life, and that clean Nothing OS 3.1 with actually useful AI features, and a promise of 6 years of security updates. All this while being significantly cheaper than many flagships, so just a lot of value here in general, which is what we expect from Nothing from the Phone A series. But my other thought is, I am now way more curious about a Nothing Phone 3 or a genuine flagship from this company, because if they're able to make this for this value, I kind of wonder what a Snapdragon 8 Gen 4, or its contemporary, and maybe even that silicon carbide battery tech we hear about, and yes, wireless charging, and a whole bunch more specs loaded into a phone like this could be, because they're so good at software and design already. I kind of hope we see something like that, hopefully soon. Okay, anyway, that's all for today. Thanks for watching. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace.